a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. However little known the personality of such a man may be, this truth is so well fixed in the minds of his new neighbours that it is considered as the rightful property of all the women and their unmarried daughters.
My dear Mr. Bennet, have you heard the news? Netherfield Park is let at last.
Netherfield, Mamma?
That large estate so close to Meryton?
The very same. Well, don't you want to know who has taken it?
You want to tell me, and I have no objection to hearing it.
It is taken by a young man of large fortune from the north of England.
Oh, is he single?
What is his name?
His name is Bingley.
Married or single?
Lydia!
Single, my dear, to be sure. Oh, a single man of large fortune, 4,000 or 5,000 a year. Oh, what a fine thing for our girls.
How so? How can it affect them?
Oh, my dear Mr. Bennet, how can you be so tiresome? You must know that I am thinking of his marrying one of them.
Oh, is that his design in settling here?
Sign? Oh, how foolish.
Well, it means he may fall in love with one of us, and I don't see why it shouldn't be me he fancies.
Or me?
Not in that bonnet.
Ow!
Girls, please. Mr. Bennet, you must do your duty as a gentleman of town and call on Netherfield's newest tenant. You must visit Mr. Bingley as soon as possible.
Oh, no, I see no occasion for that. You and the girls may go.
Mr. Bennet?
Or you may send them by themselves, which perhaps will be better still, for you are as handsome as any of them. Mr. Bingley may like you best of the party.
Mr. Bennet, please consider your daughters. They will come of nothing if you do not visit Mr. Bingley, for it will be impossible for us to visit him if you do not.
You do yourself a discredit, my dear. They will be very glad to see you, and I will assuring him of my hearty consent to his marrying whichever of my daughters he chooses. Though I must throw in a good word for my Lizzie. She has a little more wit than the rest. There. Will that do?
Oh, Mr. Bennet, you take such delight in vexing me. You have no compassion for my poor nerves.
You mistake me, my dear. I have a high respect for your nerves. They've been my full friends these 20 years at least.
You do not know what I have suffered. 5 girls and no sons to inherit the estate. How dreadful it is that your fortune is to be entailed away from your own children to that odious cousin of yours, Mr. Collins. Because of him, we simply must see the girls married well.
Patience, my dear. We will live to see many young men of 4,000 or even 5,000 a year come into the neighborhood.
It would be of no use if 20 such men should come, since you will not visit them.
Depend upon it, my dear, that when there are 20, I will visit them all.
Lizzie, I do wish you could convince father not to tease poor Mamma.
Oh, dearest Jane, you are too good for the rest of us. It's a harmless joke, and Mamma quite forgets that we shall meet the acclaimed Mr. Bingley at the Meryton Assembly, if not sooner.
Oh, don't keep coughing so, Kitty, for heaven's sakes. You will tear my nerves to pieces.
I don't cough for my own amusement.
I believe it is all in the timing, my dear. Must cough with more rhythm. What say you, Mary, on all this stuff and nonsense? The formalities of introduction and the stress of whom you may introduce or be introduced to. For I know you are a lady of deep reflection.
Well,
Yes, quite. Well, while Mary is adjusting her ideas, let us return to Mr. Bingley.
I am sick of Mr. Bingley.
I am sorry to hear that. If I had known as much this morning, I should never have called on him.
You have called on him?
Papa, I knew I should have a chance with him.
I do hope he enjoys dancing.
Lord, yes, I cannot abide by a man who does not like to dance.
Oh, I knew I should persuade you at last. I was sure you loved your girls too well to neglect such an acquaintance, and never said a word until now. What a good joke.
Yes, well, Kitty, I believe you may cough now as much as you please.
Kitty and Lydia had attacked Papa daily with questions about Mr. Bingley, but he has eluded them all. So we've been obliged to accept second-hand intelligence from our neighbours, Lady Lucas and Sir William.
He is quite young, wonderfully handsome, extremely agreeable, and to crown the whole, fond of dancing.
There you see, Lydia, he's fond of dancing.
I dearly hope you'll be favoured with a dance, dear Charlotte.
As do I, Father.
Oh, poor Mr. Bingley, soon to be trampled upon by all the young women of Hertfordshire. If only such a paragon could be accompanied by a brother or two.
And there he is, Mr. Bingley.
Oh, Lizzie. Oh, Jane, is it him? Has he come?
Indeed, Mrs. Bennet, and he brings with him his sister Caroline and a good friend from Derbyshire.
Derbyshire? Did you hear that, my dears? Mr. Bingley has friends in Derbyshire.
Mr. Bingley, we are so very pleased to have you here at our humble assemblage.
Not so pleased as we are, good sir. You and your whole village have been most welcoming.
You are most welcome, sir. I do hope you enjoy Meryton.
Thank you, Miss Lucas.
Mr. Bingley, may I present Mrs. Bennet and her daughters?
Mrs. Bennet, I confess I had hoped for the opportunity of meeting your daughters. Of whose beauty I have heard little else since arriving in town.
Oh, Mr. Bingley, you do us a great honour. May I present my eldest daughter, Miss Jane Bennet.
Miss Bennet.
And there is my second eldest, Miss Elizabeth Bennet.
Charmed, Miss Elizabeth. Simply charmed.
My other daughters are engaged at present. There's Catherine and Lydia dancing there, and Mary plays the pianoforte. I dare say she is proficient at the instrument, though cannot say as much for her singing. But Jane, oh, you will find no such deficiencies in Jane, for I dare say there is none so beautiful as she in all the county.
Indeed, madam, I quite agree. Mrs. Bennet, may I present my sister, Miss Caroline Bingley?
Oh, Miss Bingley, has your brother not made an excellent choice in settling in Hertfordshire? Are you not so delighted to see him so well situated at Netherfield? Madame, I scarce know how to contain my elation.
And this is my good friend and master of the great Pemberley estate in Derbyshire, Mr. Darcy.
Pemberley, my dear fellow? Why, we have heard Pemberley is very grand indeed.
Thank you, Sir William.
Miss Bennet, would you honour me with a dance?
I should be most pleased to, Mr. Bingley. Thank you.
It seems as all of Mr. Bingley's attentions are solely for Jane. The rest of the assembly, however, is quickly turning its attention to that of his friend, Mr. Darcy.
What a fine figure of a man, such handsome features. Do you not agree, Lizzie?
He is certainly tall, Mamma.
Master of Pemberley estate. Why, it is rumoured that he has £10,000 a year.
10,000?
Why, that is twice what Bingley is worth. Oh, I declare, he must be the handsomest man that ever was seen.
I wonder if Mamma would find him quite as handsome if he was a man of only £1,000.
Come, Darcy, I must have you dance.
I certainly shall not. You know how much I detest dancing unless I am well acquainted with my partner.
Oh, but I hate to see you standing about in this stupid manner. You must dance, for partners are scarce, and many young women here would
At
be
such an assembly as this, it would be insupportable. Your sister is engaged at present, and there is not another woman in the room with whom dancing would not be a punishment.
Oh, good Lord, Darcy! I would not be as fastidious as you for a kingdom. Oh, I never met with so many pleasant, pretty girls in my life.
You are dancing with the only handsome girl in the room.
Oh, Darcy. Jane Bennet is the most beautiful creature I ever beheld. Oh, look, there's one of her sisters, I dare say very agreeable. Do let me ask my partner to introduce you.
She is tolerable, but not handsome enough to tempt me. And I am in no humor at present to give consideration to young ladies who are ignored by other men. No, no, no. Return to your partner. Enjoy her smiles. You are wasting your time with me.
Was there ever a more disagreeable man in the world?
In fairness, I don't believe he knew we could hear.
Did you hear him, Lizzie? Not tolerable. What an odious, deviant young man. 'Tis true you are not so beautiful as Jane, Lizzie, but I dare say you are tolerable.
Thank you, Mamma.
I could never imagine making such inappropriate remarks at a public assembly. I say, Lizzie, another time I would not dance with him if I were you.
Ma'am, I may safely promise you never to dance with Mr. Darcy. Perhaps he's not so handsome as Mr. Bingley after all.
No, indeed, most forbidding, so pleased with himself, so abominably proud.
Perhaps, but his pride does not offend as much as pride often does. One cannot wonder that the master of Pemberley Estates, a young man with family, fortune, and everything in his favor, should think highly of himself. If I may suggest it, perhaps he has a right to be proud.
That is very true. I could easily forgive his pride if he had not mortified mine.
Pride is a very common failing. I believe, by all I've ever read, I'm convinced that it's very common indeed that human nature is particularly prone to it, and that there are very few of us who do not cherish a feeling of self-complacency on the score of some quality of other, real or imaginary. Vanity and pride are different things, though the words are often used synonymously. A person may be proud without being vain, and pride relates more to our opinions of ourselves, vanity to what we have others think of us, and...
Oh, do hush, Mary. No one wants to hear your philosophies.
Yes, better come away, my dear. I think you have delighted us long enough.
If my family had set out on the purpose to embarrass themselves, they could not be playing their parts with more success. Mercifully for all, this evening is nearing its conclusion.
I will be sure to send word to Longbourn of when and where the new militia is to be quartered at Meryton, just as soon as Sir William has informed me himself.
Kitty, an entire regiment soon to be stationed here in our village.
You must promise to give us names of all the officers.
And knowledge of their lodgings.
I simply can't wait to see a whole militia full of soldiers in their red regimentals.
Oh, yes, I cannot abide by a man who does not wear red regimentals.
I have suspected it for some time, but I am now convinced, madam, that we are two of the silliest girls in the country.
Oh, was it not a delightful evening? A most excellent ball for Jane to be so admired. Only think of that, my dear. She was the only creature in the room from whom Mr. Bingley asked a second to dance.
Oh, he did stand up with Charlotte Lucas, Mamma.
Yes, that quite vexed me.
And Mary King.
Yes, yes.
And Lizzie.
But it was Jane he admired most, my dears.
I think I saw him dance with Maria Lucas.
And once with me.
If he'd had any compassion for me, he would not have danced half so much. God's sake, say no more of his partners. I do hope to see you again very soon, Miss Bennet. But perhaps next when you walk through Meryton?
I would like that, Mr. Bingley.
Or sooner?
Would that this night had not passed so quickly. Good night, sir.
Lady Lucas's promise of a military regiment quartered at Meryton was not long delayed. Indeed, we are on this night invited to Lucas Lodge for their formal Meryton welcoming, to the excessive delight of Lydia and Kitty, as well as Mamma, who is, of course, anxious for another opportunity to present Jane as an eligible match for Mr. Bingley.
He's just what a young man ought to be, Lizzie. Sensible, good-humored, lively, and I never saw such happy manners.
He's also handsome, which a young man ought to be if he possibly can. And he could not help seeing that you are at least twice as pretty as every other woman in the room. Yes, I give you leave to like him. You'd like many a stupider person.
Mr. Bingley seems to admire Jane a great deal, Lizzie.
I'm happy for her, Charlotte. I believe she is soon likely to be very much in love.
If that is true, then she would do better to show more affection than she feels.
More affection? Yes, Charlotte, they're barely acquaintances.
What does that signify? Bingley likes your sister undoubtedly, but he may never do more than like her if she does not help him on.
And she will, when she has a better understanding of his character and as much as her gentle nature will allow.
Yes, but remember, Lizzie, Mr. Bingley does not know Jane's sweet disposition as you do. She must leave him in no doubt of her affections. There are very few of us who have heart enough to be truly in love without encouragement. Mr. Bingley may lose interest if she insists on guarding her temper.
Colonel Forster will have you whip Denny from his place in your sword.
Miss Lydia, please.
It is my family made to appear more tolerable from my younger sister's refusal to guard their tempers. What does Mr. Darcy mean by listening to a conversation?
That is a question which Mr. Darcy only can answer.
My dear Charlotte, might you favor us with opening the instrument? I believe we must provide our young friends with some alternative diversion, else their boundless energies will tire us all. What a charming amusement for young people, eh, Mr. Darcy? I consider dancing one of the first refinements of polished societies.
Certainly, sir, and all the less polished societies.
So?
Any savage can dance, Sir William.
Yes. Well, quite right. Very clever, though I doubt not that you are adept in the science yourself. You must allow me to present to you this young lady as a very desirable dance partner.
Please, Sir William. Please, Sir William.
A capital idea, Father. I shall open the instrument, Lizzie. You know what must follow.
You are a very strange creature by way of a friend.
Come now, Darcy, you cannot refuse to dance, I'm sure, when so much beauty is before you.
Indeed, sir, I have not the least intention of dancing.
I would be very happy to have the honor of dancing with you, Miss Bennet.
There now, you see, my dear, though this gentleman dislikes the amusement in general, he has no objections.
Mr. Darcy is all politeness.
And why should he not be? Who could ever object to such a partner?
Do you feel an inclination, Miss Bennet, to dance a reel? A reel, Miss Bennet.
Oh, I heard you before, but I could not immediately determine what to say in reply. You wanted me, I know, to say yes, so that you may despise me for my country taste. But I always delight in treating a person of such premeditated contempt. I have therefore made up my mind to tell you that I do not want to dance a reel at all. Now despise me if you dare.
Indeed, I do not dare.
Astonishing.
I can readily guess what you are thinking.
I should imagine not.
You are thinking how insupportable it would be to pass many evenings with such low society. And I am quite of your opinion. The impropriety of such people.
Your conjecture is totally wrong, I assure you. My mind was more agreeably engaged.
Oh?
Well, I have been meditating on the very great pleasure which a pair of fine eyes in the face of a pretty woman can bestow.
Pray, would you tell me what lady has inspired such reflections?
Miss Elizabeth Bennet.
I am all in astonishment. How long has she been a favorite, and when am I to wish you joy?
That is exactly the question I expected you to ask. A lady's imagination is very rapid. It jumps from admiration to love, from love to matrimony in a moment.
Nay, if you are so serious about it, I shall consider the matter as absolutely settled. Oh, yes, it is quite confirmed. Mr. Bingley has 5,000 a year. You will have a charming mother-in-law.
This morning Jane received a letter from Netherfield, the contents of which I must say sparked the excitement of my mother, and was more so than the recipient herself.
It is from Miss Bingley.
What is it about? What does she say? Make haste and tell us. My brother and Mr. Darcy are to go out dining with the officers.
I wonder why Lady Lucas did not tell us of that.
If you are not so compassionate as to dine with me today, I shall be in danger of spending the entire afternoon in a state of intolerable boredom. Sweet Jane, do rescue me if you can, and come straight upon receipt of this note. Yours ever, Caroline Bingley. So Mr. Bingley is dining out. That is very unlucky.
May I have the carriage, Father?
No, my dear. You had better go on horseback because it seems likely to rain. And then they will have to ask you to stay the night, and then you will have the opportunity of seeing Mr. Bingley after all.
Mother.
Saddle her a horse, Mr. Bennet.
The next morning we received another note from Lord Netherfield.
I find myself very unwell this morning, which I suspect I must owe to my getting so drenched yesterday. My kind new friends insist upon my staying and seeing the physician, Dr. Jones. Therefore, do not be alarmed if you should hear of his having been to see me. Excepting a sore throat and a headache, there is not much. There's not much the matter with me.
Well, my dear, if your daughter should have a dangerous fit of illness and die, it will be to know that it was all in pursuit of Mr. Bingley.
Oh, people do not die of little trifling colds. She'll be well taken care of, and she will see Mr. Bingley. There, Lizzie, was this not a lucky idea of mine?
I must go to her, Mamma.
Go to her?
I cannot leave poor Jane in the care of Miss Bingley.
Is this a hint for me, Lizzie, to send for the horses?
No, indeed. The distance is but 3 miles to Netherfield. I'd much rather walk.
In all that mud and dirt, you are not fit to be seen when you get there.
I shall be very fit to see Jane, which is all I want.
I admire your benevolence, but every impulse of feeling should be guided by reason. And in my opinion, excursions should always be in proportion to what's required of the...
We will go as far as Meryton with you, Lizzie.
Yes, and if we make haste, perhaps we may see something of Captain Carter.
Miss Bennet, you are very welcome.
Oh, forgive my intrusion, but I have come to inquire after my sister.
You have walked here from Longbourn?
It is an easy distance.
Of course it is, Miss Eliza. We must allow for all the young ladies of Hertfordshire to be excellent walkers, Mr. Darcy.
Excuse me, how fair is my sister?
She has slept ill and cannot yet leave her room, but I am sure she will fare much better now that you have arrived. I shall take you to her directly.
Thank you.
How nonsensical. What does she mean to be scampering about the country because her sister has a cold? Her hair is so untidy, so blowsy.
So it would seem.
You observed it, Mr. Darcy, I am sure. Surely you would not wish to see your sister make such an exhibition.
Certainly not.
'Tis a shame, I'm afraid, Mr. Darcy, that this adventure has rather affected your admiration of Miss Elizabeth's pretty face and fine eyes.
Not at all. They were brightened by the exercise.
I hope you won't forget Miss Eliza's wild appearance, Charles. Her petticoat, 6 inches deep in mud, I am absolutely certain.
Actually, Caroline, I find I don't often take note of petticoats, muddy or otherwise. I thought Miss Elizabeth looked remarkably well.
Brother, do be sensible. Do you truly intend to make overtures to young Jane when her sister sees fit to walk 4 or 5 miles?
3 miles.
Whatever it is, above her ankles in dirt. And alone? Do you not think that shows some sort of abominable of country town independence?
It shows an affection for her sister that is very pleasing.
Charles, you know I wish with all my heart that sweet Jane was settled well, but with such sisters, such low connections, there's little chance of it. Why, Miss Bennet told me yesterday that her uncle lives somewhere near Cheapside.
Cheapside?
It would make her not one jot less agreeable to me if she had uncles to fill all of Cheapside.
But with such relations, it must materially lessen their chances of marrying well, Bingley.
Their chances, Darcy.
Jane is still very weak, though I've finally had the comfort of seeing her sleep soundly. The improvement, however, has an unwanted side effect. I'm no longer able to plead my sister's illness as my excuse for remaining above stairs.
Miss Elizabeth, I do wish you would join us. The trumps are not on my side tonight.
I do not believe I could be of any help, sir. I have not the skill at the card table as my mother or aunts.
Miss Eliza Bennet despises cards. She is a great reader and has no pleasure in anything else.
I deceive neither such praise nor censure. I am not a great reader, and I have pleasure in a great many things.
In nursing your sister, I'm sure you have pleasure.
Thank you, Mr. Bingley.
May I fetch you another book? Only I wish my collection were larger for your benefit and for my credit.
I assure you, this suits me perfectly.
I am astonished, Charles, that father should have left so small a collection of books. What a delightful library you have at Pemberley, Mr. Darcy.
It ought to be. It has been the particular project of my sister this past year to see it expanded and maintained.
Oh, dear Georgiana, is Miss Darcy grown much since the spring? Will she be as tall as me?
She is now about Miss Elizabeth Bennet's height.
How we long to see her again, don't we, Charles? Such countenance, such manners, so extremely accomplished.
It is amazing to me how young ladies can be so very accomplished as they all are.
All are, Bingley?
Yes, all. I am sure I have never introduced to a young lady without being informed that she was very accomplished.
Well, I cannot boast of knowing more than half a dozen that are really accomplished.
Then you must comprehend a great deal in the notion of it.
I do.
Oh, certainly. No young lady can really be esteemed accomplished who does not have a thorough knowledge of music, singing, dancing, drawing, and modern languages. To deserve the word, she must possess a certain something in her air and manner of walking, the tone of her voice, her address and expressions.
And to this, she must add something more substantial.
And what is that, Darcy?
The improvement of her mind by extensive reading.
I'm no longer surprised at your knowing only 6 accomplished women, Mr. Darcy. I really wonder now at your knowing any.
Are you so severe upon your own sex?
I never saw such a woman. Never saw such capacity and taste and intelligence, elegance, all in one lady, Mr. Darcy.
Perhaps you lack the proper connections, Miss Eliza. I must protest that we have met many young women in our acquaintance who answer that description.
Have you? Well, then I humbly leave Mr. Darcy in your capable hands, so that you may extol their virtues to his satisfaction. I confess I have nothing to offer that could so please Mr. Darcy.
Eliza Bennet is one of those young ladies who seek to recommend themselves to the other sex by undervaluing their own. It may work on some men, but in my opinion, it is a vile device, a very mean art in the pursuit of a man's affections.
Undoubtedly. Though I might add there's a certain meanness in all the arts which ladies employ in the pursuit of a man's affections.
Such insufferable snobbery. As soon as Jane was the slightest bit better, I wrote to Mamma and begged her to send the carriage. This was her reply.
After speaking with those in town, we agreed that it would not at all be advisable to remove Jane from Netherfield. She is a good deal too ill to be moved. Do be a good girl and request Bingley that Jane trespass on his kindness a little longer.
The next day passed as tediously as the first. That night I sent another post to Mamma, this time informing her that both Jane and Dr. Jones agreed that she was much improved.
Unfortunately, Mr. Bennet cannot spare the horses from the farm today. Please convey to Mr. Bingley our sincerest thanks for his good attentions to our dear Jane, and beg that he continue to attend to her a little while more.
I have now been here for almost a week. Honestly, was not for sweet Jane and her attentive Mr. Bingley, I might truly go mad.
Eliza, let me persuade you to take a turn about the room. I assure you it is very refreshing. Will you not join our party, Mr. Darcy?
That would defeat your purpose, Miss Bingley. I must decline.
Our purpose? What could he mean, Miss Eliza?
I do not know, but I believe the surest way of disappointing him would be to ask nothing about it.
I do not object to explaining. You walk together because you know your figures appear to the greatest advantage in walking, and you intend for me to admire them from my chair.
Shocking! I have never heard anything so abominable. How shall we punish him, Miss Bennet?
Nothing is so easy. If you wish it, tease him, laugh at him.
Tease him? Tease Mr. Darcy? Tease calmness of temper and presence of mind?
Is Mr. Darcy so upright that he's not to be laughed at?
Of course not. But I have striven in my life to avoid certain weaknesses which often expose one to ridicule.
Such as vanity and pride?
Vanity is a weakness indeed, but pride, where there is real superiority of mind and upbringing, pride will always be under good regulation.
I see. Miss Bingley, I fear I must disappoint you. Mr. Darcy has no defect to laugh at. He owns it himself without disguise.
I have made no such assertion. I have faults enough, Miss Bennet. Some may call my temper resentful. I cannot easily forgive the follies of others or their offences against myself. My good opinion once lost is lost forever.
That is indeed a failing. I really cannot laugh at it. You are safe from me.
There is, I believe, in everyone a tendency towards some particular evil, a natural defect.
Yours is a propensity to hate everybody.
And yours is to willfully misunderstand them.
I wrote to Mamma again.
Lizzie, stay where you are.
Only after 4 weeks' time is Mamma satisfied with her scheme. Unfortunately, she has finally sent the carriage, and it's not empty.
Oh, Mr. Bingley, I am sure if it were not for such good friends, I do not know what has come of our dear girl.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Bingley, Miss Bingley, for such unexampled generosity.
Are you quite sure you're well enough to return? You might catch another cold, and we would be only too happy.
I would not dream of trespassing further, sir. I assure you, I'm quite recovered and—
Mr. Bingley, do you not remember your promise to throw a ball once you settled in Netherfield?
Lydia!
It's nearly a month now, and it would be the most shameful thing in the world if you did not keep your word.
You are perfectly right. In fact, once your sister is home and most assuredly recovered, you should please name the very day of the ball.
There now, girls, you see? Oh, Miss Bingley, you have the most charming brother, don't you agree? Charming. What a gentlemanly, amiable man you are, Mr. Bingley.
Thank you, ma'am.
I do not like to boast of my own child, but it is what everybody says. Why, when she was only 15, there was a gentleman at my brother in Gardener's in town, so much in love with her that he wrote down some poetry
and thus ended his affection. I wonder who first discovered the efficacy of poetry in driving away love.
I have been used to considering poetry as the food of love.
Of a fine, stout, healthy love it may. Everything nourishes what is strong already. But if there's only a slight thin sort of infatuation, one good sonnets will starve it away entirely. To my speech he makes no answer. And why does he smile so? In a spirit of mockery, surely, for our mother's behaviour does Jane no great favours in securing Bingley's affection. Though in truth the man does not seem to mind mamma's impertinence. Miss Bingley certainly wishes to escape the possibility of such a relation. But what would any of us be to Mr. Darcy? Alas, I'm resolved to think of him no more, for though I'm glad to finally return to Longbourn, there is soon to be another man of more immediate concern.
Take care, my dear, because I have reason to expect an addition to our family party.
Mr. Bingley? Why, Jane, you never dropped a word. Oh, good Lord. Lydia, ring the bell. I must talk.
It is not Mr. Bingley. It is my cousin, Mr. Collins, a person I've never met. Though when I am dead, here he may turn you all out of this house as soon as he pleases.
Oh, my dear, no. I cannot bear to hear the name mentioned.
You must bear it, Mrs. Bennet, for he wrote some 3 weeks ago. Dear sir,
having received ordination and having been so fortunate as to be distinguished by the patronage of the Right Honourable Lady Catherine de Bourgh, I feel it my duty as a clergyman to establish peace within our two families. On these grounds, I hope that by my being next in the entail of Longbourn will not lead you to reject this olive branch. I cannot help but be concerned at being the means of injuring your amiable daughters once you are dead, and beg leave to apologize for it and to make them every possible amends.
At 2 o'clock, therefore, we may expect this eloquent peacekeeping gentleman.
In point of composition, his letter does not seem defective. The idea of the olive branch perhaps is not wholly new, yet I think it is well expressed.
There, Mrs. Bennet, are you satisfied?
If, under the patronage of Lady Catherine de Bourgh, your cousin is in a position to remedy the dreadful entail and make amends to the girls, I shall not be the person to discourage him.
I cannot make him out. Once you are dead. And what can you mean by apologizing for being next in the entail? Can this be a sensible man, Papa?
Oh, no, my dear, I think not. I have great hopes of finding him quite the reverse. Ah, and here he is at 2 o'clock exactly, punctual to his time.
Good cousin, dear Mrs. Bennet, you ought to be commended on keeping such happy lodgings here at Longbourn.
Lodgings, sir?
I confess I never saw sweeter arrangements. Why, I am much struck with the furniture and the size of this apartment. It reminds me very much of a small summer breakfast parlour over at Rosings.
A breakfast parlour?
Indeed. Why, oh, my dear Mrs. Bennet, I am mortified that you should take for offence my observation. I assure you that Rosings Park, the home of my most esteemed patroness, Lady Catherine de Bourgh, is very grand indeed. Why, the chimney piece at Rosings alone costs £800.
£800, dear boy, is that so? My can be more fortunate than our guest, do you think, Lizzie?
For indeed you could not, though I take no credit myself. I owe such good fortune entirely to Lady Catherine de Bourgh. Why, she has asked me to dine twice over at Rosings, and has been so kind as to approve of my first 2 sermons at my new parish.
Oh, how very kind of her.
And has deigned to approve all the alterations that I have made to the parsonage, even venturing to suggest that I install Shelves in the closet upstairs. Is that not the most clever idea, Mr. Bennet?
Shelves in the closet. My dear, how have we ever gotten on without such dazzling inventiveness?
Mr. Collins, do allow me to.
Oh, of course. How impertinent of me. This must be your fine family of daughters. Well, permit me to say, Mrs. Bennet, that while I have heard much of their beauty, fame has fallen short of the truth.
You are very kind, sir. I would like to.
And I hope that you will not think me very forward in adding that I do not doubt in seeing them all in due time, well disposed of in marriage.
What a generous compliment.
I am pleased that you think so. I am happy on every occasion to offer those little compliments which are always acceptable to ladies.
I say, it is lucky that you possess the talent of flattering with such delicacy. May I ask whether it proceeds from the impulse of the moment, or is it the result of previous study?
Oh, chiefly they arise from the moment. But although I do sometimes compose little elegant arrangements which may be adaptable to suit a variety of occasions. Absurd. Mrs. Bennet, your lips are as red as the blood of the fatted calf being led to slaughter.
Delightful. He is everything I hoped for, Lizzie. Well, might I suggest you seize the opportunity of inviting Mr. Collins on your walk into Meryton so he may become better acquainted with our little village?
Will you not join us, Papa?
Oh, no, my dear. For I can confess I can think of nothing else save with the enchanting possibility of installing shelves in our own closets. My dears, please excuse me. He is ridiculous.
Mrs. Bennet, I beg that you do not suspicion any hint of offense just now in my wishing to see your daughters soon married.
Not at all. I'm sure you are sincere, and I wish the same good fortune with all my heart, else they end up destitute.
You allude perhaps to the fate of your husband's estate.
I do indeed, sir. It is grievous for my poor girls to have their father's money entailed away from them.
But I assure you, madam, I am very sensible to the hardship of my fair cousins. Indeed, it is in fact my reason for seeking this meeting at Longbourns. You see, my patroness, Lady Catherine de Bourgh, advised me most splendidly during my last visit at Rosings. She said,
Mr. Collins, you must marry. Choose properly. Let her be an active, useful sort of girl, not brought up high, but able to make a small income go a good way. If you can find such a woman, bring her to Hunsford Parsonage, and I will visit her to give my approval.
Mrs. Bennet, that I take Lady Catherine de Bourgh's generous condescension as among the best of the advantages in my power to offer your daughters. Oh, well, who else could tell me?
Mr. Collins, am I to understand that your plan to make amends for the state of the entail is to marry one of my daughters?
Why, of course. Oh dear, did I not speak plainly? I do hope to always be succinct.
Mr. Collins!
I thought it an excellent plan, and her ladyship quite agreed. So I came to Longbourn, meaning to choose one of your daughters, if of course I found them as beautiful as they are most commonly reported. and upon seeing them, madam, I am decided the eldest.
Jane?
A lovely choice indeed, unequaled beauty, and I think in the interest of seniority, don't you agree?
Oh, your taste does you credit, sir. However, I must tell you that we suspect Jane to be very soon engaged to Mr. Bingley of Netherfield.
Oh.
However, may I suggest Elizabeth?
Your second born?
Indeed, second only to Jane in birth and beauty.
Hmm. 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 Done, madam.
Mamma, it seems, is stirring the fire for the man she could not bear to speak of earlier today, is now her dearest companion. The nature of her latest scheme? I can hardly guess. Though I do have my suspicions. These cares will fade, however, for we have last arrived at Meryton, and Captain Denny is introducing us to...
My good friend, George Wickham.
At your service, my ladies.
Why, Denny, where have you been hiding so tall a gentleman from our acquaintance?
Denny fears of losing you as a dancing partner, Lydia.
No, indeed, Miss Bennet. I assure you, Wickham has just arrived from town.
From London, sir.
Indeed.
It's a pity he doesn't follow in the offices of his friends, isn't it, Kitty? For he looks so much more handsome in a red coat.
Aye, then Denny and Carter might welcome him with a parade of sabers and trumpets.
Kitty, please. Oh, Mr. Wickham, do excuse my younger sister's impertinence. They have eyes for little else besides the men of the regiment these days.
Not at all, Miss Bennet. In fact, your sisters will soon have their wish. I have just this morning accepted a commission into the officer corps.
There, Lydia, you see, he'll be a soldier after all.
Perhaps you all may show Mr. Collins the lay of the shops.
Lizzie?
He does so wish to become well acquainted with Meryton.
Miss Elizabeth, you are very generous in your attentions to me. I promise I will not be gone from your side a moment longer than necessary.
Do take your time, Mr. Collins.
Courteous fellow, Miss Bennet. Is he not the new vicar at Hunsford Parsonage?
Yes, are you familiar with it?
Only with its benefactress.
Not Lady Catherine de Bourgh.
Yes, you are acquainted?
Oh, heavens no. But I believe we may soon have our fill of her influence through her esteemed guest. Oh, forgive my rudeness, Mr. Wickham. I fear we have all made a ridiculous first impression.
Nothing of the kind. I find your relations to be quite charming. And believe me, Miss Elizabeth, I consider myself fortunate enough to have been both raised in privilege and reduced to poverty. Though hard, my life has afforded me the desire to make friends based on the merits of their own character, rather than those of their relations.
Can such a man truly exist?
Look, Jane, it's Mr. Bingley.
How fortuitous. We were just on our way to Longbourn to inquire after your health, Miss Bennet.
You're too kind, Mr. Bingley.
Are you quite recovered from your ordeal, dear Jane? Miss Bennet, I confess it warms my heart to see you. You would not be out in the country air were you not quite recovered.
Well, I am feeling much.
You see, Jane, how attentive is your friend. Mr. Bingley, may I introduce Mr. Bennet's cousin and our guest, Mr. Collins?
Miss Bennet, I hope that you...
Mr. Darcy?
Extraordinary.
I am afraid, Miss Bennet, it cannot possibly have escaped your notice that very cold meeting just now.
Indeed, I would not want to pry, but...
Are you much acquainted with Mr. Darcy?
As much as I ever wish to be. I've spent 6 days in the same household as him. Far too long to spend with such a disagreeable person.
I have no right to give my opinion. I have known him too long to be a fair judge. Has Mr. Darcy been in Hertfordshire long?
About a month.
And is he much thought of?
Mr. Wickham, he is not at all liked in hardly any household, save for Netherfield. Everybody is disgusted with his pride.
I cannot pretend to be sorry to hear it. I have been a disappointed man, Miss Bennet. Military life is not what I was intended for. Mr. Darcy has done me a terrible disservice.
Lizzie! Mr. Bingley has named the day of the ball. We are invited to Netherfield next Tuesday.
And he has promised to invite all the officers, Mr. Wickham. We do hope to see you there.
You may depend upon it, Miss Bennet.
Do you dance, Mr. Wickham?
Most readily.
There, Denny. You see, you will have a rival after all.
Going to outshine us then, eh, Wickham?
Oh, we are very favoured with your personal invitation, Mr. Bingley, and you are so generous to include Mr. Collins as well. Is he not, Lizzie?
Indeed, Mamma, but I wonder that you do not dread a rebuke from the Archbishop, sir. Is it appropriate for a clergyman to attend a ball?
Well, I thank you most exceedingly for your selfless consideration, but I fear that a ball given by a young man of character can have no evil tendencies.
But would Lady Catherine approve?
Oh, dearest cousin, I am so far from the objection to dancing that I hope to be honored with the hands of all of my fair cousins. In fact, I take this opportunity of soliciting yours, Miss Elizabeth, for the first 2 dances.
Promised to Mr. Collins by my own mother. And I so dearly wished to have been engaged by Mr. Wickham for all those dances. I confess the thought entered my mind as rapidly as it would Lydia's. Everything he said was agreeable, such manners and ease of expression, while even the duel's topic he rendered interesting. And in the days leading up to the Netherfield ball, my thoughts of dancing a great deal with Mr. Wickham were surpassed only by my desire to learn what terrible disservice had been wrought upon him by Mr. Darcy.
Miss Bennet, thank you most emphatically for the dance.
It was my pleasure, Mr. Collins.
I dare say we were excellently matched on the floor.
Quite, though I believe
My dear Elizabeth, I fear that I may seem brash, but might I entreat you to
Miss
another...
Elizabeth, would you favor me with your hand for the next 2 dances?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Wickham. I would be delighted. Excuse me, Mr. Collins. Thank you.
I must confess the gesture is wholly selfish. I have been hoping for a dance with you since our walk together in Meryton.
As I've been hoping for a chance of speaking with you.
Forgive me, Miss Elizabeth. You are both charming and transparent. You are no doubt curious as to the nature of my acquaintance with Mr. Darcy.
I confess I've thought of little else. It is impossible to imagine just how he'd been the means of your ruin.
He's not always been bad. You see, my father had the management of old Mr. Darcy's estate.
His steward.
Precisely. Darcy and I spent the better part of our youth together. I dare say we were once as brothers. Oh, this surprises you.
Well, how can it not?
His father, the late Mr. Darcy, was my godfather, and upon my own father's death promised to provide for me. He intended me for the church, and meant to provide me a parish and a living as soon as it became available.
And did he?
No. He died before one became vacant, after which young Darcy ignored his father's wishes, and in time gave the living I should have had to another man. I was left penniless.
Heavens, how could Mr. Darcy dishonor his own father's will?
There was such informality in the terms of it, the law was not in my favor.
This is quite shocking. He deserves to be publicly disgraced.
Sometime he will be, but it shall not be by me. Till I can forget the father, I can never defy or expose the son.
I had not thought Mr. Darcy is so bad as this. What could have induced him to behave so cruelly?
I believe Darcy grew jealous. His father was uncommonly attached to me, though I was but the poor son of his steward. Had the late Mr. Darcy liked me less, his son might have borne with me better.
Oh, such malicious revenge, such injustice. I wonder now at his intimacy with Mr. Bingley, who seems so amiable. He cannot know what Mr. Darcy is.
Probably not. Mr. Darcy can please where he chooses. Among those he considers his equals, he is a very different man.
Excuse me, Miss Elizabeth. Might I have a word with Mr. Wickham?
Ah, Miss Eliza, your sister has been telling me how much you favored George Wickham, though I'm sure he failed to mention that he was the son of old Wickham, the late Mr. Darcy's overseer.
Yes, he informed me of that himself.
Did he? Well, let me advise you as a friend. Do not trust in all his assertions. I do not know the particulars, but I do know that George Wickham treated Mr. Darcy in a most infamous manner.
Has he?
I pity you, Miss Eliza, for the discovery of your favourite's guilt, but really, considering his lineage, one cannot expect much better.
His guilt and his lineage appear by your account to be the same. You accuse him of nothing worse than being the son of Mr. Darcy Stewart, a relation he proudly acknowledged.
I beg your pardon. My interference was kindly meant.
Miss Bennet, I regret that I have been obliged to go to town on urgent business. I must painfully withdraw my invitation to dance.
Oh, but why?
I am sorry, Miss Elizabeth. I do not imagine his business would have called him away just now if it were not for a certain gentleman.
Oh, Charlotte, I have much to tell you.
We have been most highly gratified, my dear sir. Such superior dancing is not often seen. It is evident that you belong in the highest of society.
Thank you, Lady Lucas.
Allow me to say that your fair partner, Miss Bingley, did not disgrace you, and I must hope to have this pleasure often repeated, especially when a certain desirable event shall take place.
Oh, such a well-suited match, wouldn't you agree? Oh, what congratulations will then flow in.
For Mr. Wickham to have endured such unkindness, I wonder that they might both have been deceived in some way. Perhaps there has been some misrepresentation.
Misrepresentation? How can you think of defending him?
My dearest Lizzie, do consider in what disgraceful light such an event must place Mr. Darcy. To be treating his father's godson in such a way, it is impossible. No man who so clearly values his character and reputation can be capable of it. And what of Mr. Bingley? That his most intimate friend is so deceived in him.
I can more easily believe Mr. Bingley being deceived than Mr. Wickham inventing such a history.
It is difficult indeed, most distressing. One does not know what to think.
I beg your pardon, one knows exactly what to think.
Miss Bennet, would you do me the honor of joining me in the next waltz?
Mr. Darcy, I can think of no other person.
Don't be a simpleton, Lizzie. You surely do not know the whole of it. Do not let your fancy for Wickham lead you to embarrass a man of 10 times his worth.
Thank you. Yes. I do so enjoy this waltz. It's your turn to say something now, Mr. Darcy. I talked of the dance, and you want to remark of the size of the room.
Do you talk by a rule then when you're dancing?
Usually, though we may arrange it so we may say as little as possible.
Do you seek to satisfy my feelings at present or your own?
Both.
Do you often walk to Meryton with your sisters?
Quite often. When you met us the other day, we were forming a new acquaintance, Mr. Wickham.
Yes. George Wickham is blessed with the happy ability of making friends. Now, whether he is equally capable of keeping them is less certain.
It seems he has been unlucky to lose your friendship. I remember hearing you once say, Mr. Darcy, that you do not easily forget the faults of others. Are you very cautious then in first forming that resentment?
I am.
And never allow yourself to be blinded by prejudice?
I certainly hope not. May I ask to what these questions tend?
Merely to the illustration of your character. I am trying to make it out.
And what is your success?
I do not get on at all. I hear such different accounts of you as puzzle me exceedingly.
Well, perhaps you should not attempt to sketch my character at the present moment.
If I do not take your likeness now, I will never have another opportunity.
Well, I would by no means suspend any pleasure of yours. Good night, Miss Bennet.
Insolent man. Very soon it seemed that the Netherfield ball was to be the catalyst for a series of equally disappointing affairs to follow.
Lord, what is to become of us? What are we to do?
Heavens, girls, what is the matter?
The regiment, Mamma. They are to leave in a fortnight.
And they're going to be in Canton and Brighton for the whole summer.
Papa, and might we go to Brighton on holiday?
Go to Brighton.
Oh, yes, Mr. Bennet. What a lovely idea.
You do not want to see us so miserable all summer, Papa.
And Colonel Forster's wife has designs on taking up sea bathing in Brighton.
Oh, a little sea bathing would set me up forever.
Sea bathing, eh? What say you to that, Mary?
My sisters must be congenial with the generality of the female minds. I confess sea bathing would have no chance for me. I should infinitely prefer a book.
Bravo, dear, bravo. For once, I am in complete support of your delightful penchant for philosophy. Come, come, Mrs. Bennet.
Papa!
Oh.
No, I have not the smallest intention of yielding. The regiment shall go to Brighton, and we shall remain here at Longbourn.
Poor Lydia. Though her anguish is mild compared to that of dear Jane's.
I've received a letter from Miss Bingley. Oh, Lizzie, I am quite distressed. Mr. Bingley has left Netherfield, and Caroline writes that he has no intention of returning.
Impossible! Jane, no one who's ever seen you together can doubt his affection.
But Caroline insists he is in no hurry to return from London, and she goes as far as wishing us much joy for Christmas at Hertfordshire. It is evident by this that he intends to stay through winter at least.
It is only evident what Miss Bingley intends. It does not signify how he feels.
How can you think so? If Mr. Bingley truly had any desire to continue our acquaintance, would he not have visited Longbourn himself before departing?
Oh, Jane, your humility usually does you credit, but in this case is your enemy. The truth is plain. Miss Bingley sees that her brother is in love with you, but for her we are not rich enough, not grand enough. On this point of view, she and Mr. Darcy are as one. So she convinced him to leave Netherfield.
Oh, Lizzie, I cannot believe Caroline would be so deceitful.
But?
No, I know your disposition towards her, but I have not the capacity of indulging such fanciful ideas. It is plain in the writing. Mr. Bingley... Mr. Bingley does not feel for me as I'd hoped.
Can no one, save for myself and Mr. Wickham, understand the true nature of such proud, arrogant snobbery as displayed by the likes of Caroline Bingley and Mr. Darcy? Still, even Jane's news is nothing compared to the mortification I am just about to endure.
Oh, yes, certainly. I am sure Lizzie will be very happy and can have no objection. There now, I shall leave you some privacy.
Oh, dear ma'am, do not go. Mr. Collins cannot have anything to say to me that anyone need not hear.
Oh, nonsense, Lizzie. I desire that you remain. Mr. Collins wishes to speak to you alone.
Mamma, please.
Lizzie, stay.
Believe me, my dear Elizabeth, your modesty adds to your perfections. You can hardly doubt the purpose of my desired discourse.
Oh, Mr. Collins,
Almost as soon as I entered the house, I singled you out as the companion of my future life. But before I go running away with my feelings, I must state my reasons for marrying.
Oh, Mr. Collins, please understand.
First, I think it is the right thing for every clergyman to set an example of matrimony in his parish.
Quite right. However,
And second, that I am convinced it will add greatly to my happiness.
Sir, I beg of you.
And third, that is It is the particular recommendation of Lady Catherine de Bourgh. Oh, she advised me most splendidly, Miss Elizabeth, and you can be assured to be favored with equal condescension once we are married. Why, just before my journey to Longbourn, she said,
Mr. Collins, you must marry. Choose properly. Let her be a useful kind of girl.
You are too hasty, sir. You forget I have made no answer. I am honored by the compliment of your proposal, but it would be impossible to accept.
I know it is usual for young ladies to reject the addresses of the man that they secretly mean to accept. When I do the honor of asking again, I hope to hear a more favorable answer.
Upon my word, your expectation is rather extraordinary. I am perfectly serious in my refusal.
You flatter me, dear cousin, and I know that my hand is worthy of your acceptance. And being that I am to inherit this estate after your father's death, and your own dowry as well, so small, it is unlikely that another offer of marriage will ever be made to you. So I must attribute your rejection to your wish of increasing my love by suspense.
Mr. Collins, can I not speak plainer? I will not marry you.
You are uniformly charming.
Oh, Mr. Collins, let me congratulate you on your engagement.
Oh, thank you very much, Mrs. Bennet. I do believe to be engaged as soon as your elegant daughter consents to receive my hand.
She has not consented.
No, not yet. Though I have every reason to trust that I will be satisfied, since her refusal naturally must flow from her bashful and modest and delicacy of character.
A bashful modesty. Lizzie! Mr. Bennet!
Ma'am?
Oh, depend on it, Miss Collins. Lizzie shall be brought to reason. Mr. Bennet!
Brought to reason?
She's a headstrong, foolish girl, but I will make her accept you.
Headstrong and foolish? Huh. Do you mean to say that she actually rejected me?
I will go directly to Mr. Bennet, and we shall very soon settle with it, I am sure.
Pardon me, Mrs. Bennet, but if she really is headstrong and foolish, I think that she may not be an appropriate wife to Lady Catherine. I mean to me. Forgive me, but I am invited this evening to dine with Sir William and Lady Lucas. Perhaps it would be better that I go there for the remainder of my stay.
Mr. Bennet, we are all in an uproar. You must speak to Lizzie, for she vows she will not have him.
I have not the pleasure of understanding you. About what do you bluster, madam?
Mr. Collins and Lizzie. Lizzie declares she will not marry Mr. Collins, and Mr. Collins begins to say that he will not have Lizzie.
Let her be called in. She shall hear my opinion.
Lizzie! Here, child! Lizzie! My child!
My dear, you are summoned to a matter of grave importance. I understand that Mr. Collins has made you an offer of marriage and that you have refused.
I have, sir.
And your mother insists upon your accepting it. Have I got it right, Mrs. Bennet?
Yes, or I will never see her again.
Very well. We now come to the point. An unhappy alternative is before you, Elizabeth. From this day on, you must be a stranger to one of your parents. Your mother will never see you again if you do not marry Mr. Collins, and I will never see you again if you do.
For days now, I've been the least favourite of my mother's children, and my father the very bane of her existence. Indeed, not an hour has passed without some allusion to the fact that I've ruined us all. Father bears it all with great amusement, and I as well. But Mr. Collins is true to his word. He has left Longbourn and is now staying at Lucas Lodge. My only regret is my poor friend Charlotte having to endure the same insipid conversation we had before.
Dear Elizabeth.
Oh, Charlotte, I was just thinking of you. What news from Lucas Lodge?
Lizzie, I fear I will be a great disappointment to you.
Oh, nonsense. What an odd thing to say.
Do heed what I have to tell you. You know that Mr. Collins has been a guest in my father's house.
Of course. Allow me to apologize for that most unfortunate awkwardness. I fear my family has burdened yours with the most ridiculous of guests, and
Lizzie, I have promised to marry him.
Who?
I am engaged to Mr. Collins.
The more I see of the world, the more I am dissatisfied with it.
Mr. Collins is respectable. It is an eligible match.
Every day confirms my belief in the failings of the human character.
And you know I am not so romantic as you are, Jane.
Is this to be the end of good sense in Hertfordshire?
Remember that I am one of a very large family, and I do so wish to be settled and ease the burden on my parents. Can you not wish me joy?
Charlotte, I'm very happy for you. Please accept my heartfelt wishes for a good marriage.
And Lizzie, I shall depend on hearing from you very often. You will write, will you not?
Certainly.
And you will come see me?
Why, we shall meet often in Hertfordshire.
I am not likely to leave my new home for some time. Promise me, Lizzie. Promise me you'll come to Hertford Parsonage as our honored guest.
Act 1, Scene 8A, Take 2.
Well, Lizzie, off to see the new Mrs. Collins?
I am.
Foolish girl. Used to think Charlotte Luke is a girl of tolerable sense. I do hope your mother soon learns to make the best of it.
As do I, Papa.
You must promise to think on me with pity, Elizabeth.
Pity, sir?
While you are away, I fear our evening conversation will lose much of its animation.
Oh, Papa.
And nearly all of its sense.
Oh, no, indeed.
There now, be a good girl. Oh, and be sure to write and tell us what you think of Lady Catherine de Bourgh.
Lady Catherine de Bourgh, do not make yourself uneasy about your apparel, dear cousin. Lady Catherine will not think worse of you for being...
You are a very genteel, pretty kind of girl.
Thank you, your ladyship.
She has how many sisters?
4, ma'am.
And are any of your younger sisters out?
Yes, ma'am, all.
All? What, all 5? My nephews will be most shocked to hear it. Do you not agree, Mr. Collins? It is most irregular. Your sisters must be very young.
My youngest is not yet 16.
All 5 out at once, without the elder sisters married? How very odd.
Perhaps, but I think it would be very hard upon the sisters to not have their share of society simply because the elder sisters have not yet married, ma'am.
Upon my word, My nephews will think you give your opinion very decidedly for so young a person. Was your governess so neglectful in checking your manner?
We had no governess.
No governess? 5 daughters and no governess? Your mother must have been quite a slave to your education.
That was not precisely the case.
Do you at least play the pianoforte, Miss Bennet? Do you sing?
A little.
Oh, well, thank heaven for that. Mr. Collins, when my nephews arrive, we shall hear Miss Elizabeth play and sing.
Oh, a most ingenious plan, your ladyship.
Pray, who are these nephews whose presence even Lady Catherine must wait to be graced with?
Oh, Lizzie, do forgive me.
Why, what is it?
I quite forgot to mention.
Charlotte?
Lady Catherine's nephews are...
Oh, Mr. Darcy.
Miss Bennet?
Miss Elizabeth Bennet? Darcy, you never mentioned she would be so near Rosings.
I didn't know.
I am so very glad to meet you at last, Miss Bennet.
At last, Colonel.
Why, my cousin Darcy speaks of little else than his recent adventures in Hertfordshire.
Does he?
Indeed. And I am so grateful to find such a welcome relief to be had near Rosings. I fear my Aunt Catherine can be a rather challenging conversationalist.
You flatter me, sir. I am not so much of a relief.
Really? I have heard quite a different account.
You mean to me, Mr. Darcy, by coming in such a state, having given your cousin what is, I'm sure, an ungenerous account of our conversations.
You do not really believe I could entertain any design of frightening you?
What is that you're saying, Darcy? Fitzwilliam? What are you telling Miss Bennet? What are you talking of?
We were talking of music, madam. Music.
Music? Then pray speak loud. I must have my share in the conversation. Miss Bennet has consented to favor us with a song this evening, although I entertain no notion that she will be a great proficient. We shall see how poorly she has fared without a governess.
Indeed, madam. What say you to that, Miss Bennet? Shall you disgrace us all with a performance unequal to her ladyship's standards?
I'm afraid so, Colonel. On this point, Lady Catherine and I are in agreement. I am not so proficient at the pianoforte, am I, Mr. Darcy? I believe you once had the displeasure of hearing me play at Netherfield.
Astonishing! Allow me to profess my deepest admiration for your wit and spirit, Miss Bennet. I don't often see Darcy at a loss for words.
Thank you for the compliments, but I cannot accept them. Surely as his cousin, you have far more leave to behave with as much familiarity as I dare. I must beg your forgiveness.
You may beg for it, but I shan't give it. Might you favour me with a walk through Rosings Park, Miss Bennet?
Where are they going? Where are you going, Fitzwilliam? I'm entitled to know.
Do you mean to stay long at Rosings, Colonel?
I am at Darcy's disposal. He pays a visit to his aunt every year in honour of his late mother.
Your cousin cannot fend for himself amongst such glistening condescension.
He can, but he likes to have his own way. I suspect you already know that.
Oh, yes, I know a great deal of Mr. Darcy's way. I had the pleasure of spending a week in his company at the estate of his friend, Mr. Bingley. Oh, are you all acquainted?
The Bingleys. Yes, I know them a little. Mr. Bingley is a pleasant gentleman, a great friend of Darcy's.
Yes, I dare say Mr. Darcy takes prodigious care of him.
Oh, he does take care in those points where Mr. Bingley is most in need. Why, from something Darcy said during our journey here, I have reason to think Bingley very much indebted to him.
Indebted to him? Why?
Well, it is a delicate matter.
You may depend on my silence, sir. Oh, what did he say?
He only conveyed his relief at having saved Bingley from a most imprudent marriage. Of course, he would not mention names or particulars, so I can only suspect it had been Bingley.
Did Mr. Darcy give you reasons for his interference?
I understand there are some very strong objections against the lady.
Why was he to be the judge? Is Mr. Bingley not his own master?
Miss Bennet, are you quite all right?
Oh, forgive me, Colonel. I have a sudden headache. I must beg return to Hunsford. Strong objections to the lady. Objection to sweet Jane? Oh, I long expected some degree of Mr. Darcy's influence in Miss Bingley's scheme. But to be the chief architect of Bingley's separation from Jane, Darcy, who is nothing to Bingley except a friend, why should he care who he marries?
Lizzie,
Yes, Charlotte.
there is someone here to see you.
Miss Bennet, forgive my intrusion.
Intrusion, you.
I thought that is, your headache. I understood from Fitzwilliam that you...
I'm better now.
Miss Bennet, that is, might I inquire, in vain I have struggled. It will not do. You must allow me to tell you how ardently I admire and love you. From almost our first meeting at Hertfordshire, I have failed to repress my feelings. They are born of such passion that I could hardly find the words to speak in front of you for fear of giving myself away or giving you false hope of receiving my attentions. Your liveliness of mind, Miss Bennet, the severity of your wit, your eyes, have me utterly defeated. Now, I am conscious of your inferiority of station, the degradation I am sure to endure in the eyes of society, and the objectionable nature of your whole family, whose condition in life is so decidedly beneath my own. Nevertheless, I have formed so affectionate an attachment as to be unable to conquer it, despite my better judgment. I hope now to be relieved of my anxiety and rewarded by your accepting my hand in marriage.
Mr. Darcy, in such a case as this, I believe one is expected to express gratitude for the feelings related, however unequally they may be returned. But I cannot. I have never desired your good opinion, and you have certainly bestowed it most unwillingly. I am sorry to cause anyone pain, but I hope it will be of short duration.
And this is all the reply which I have the honor of expecting? I wonder why, with so little endeavor at civility, that I am rejected.
Civility, with so evident a design of offending and insulting me. You told me you liked me against your will, your reason, and even against your character. Is that not some excuse for incivility? I have every reason to think ill of you. Do you think any consideration would tempt me to accept the man who has been the means of ruining the happiness of my dear sister Jane? Or would you dare deny that part you acted in dividing her from Bingley?
I have no wish of denying it. I did everything in my power to separate my friend from your sister. Towards him, I have been kinder than towards myself.
But it is not merely the affair on which my dislike of you is founded. My opinion of you was decided months ago upon the account I received of your behavior towards poor Mr. Wickham.
Oh, poor Wickham.
Yes, and what imaginary act of friendship can you defend yourself there?
You take an eager interest in that gentleman's concerns.
Who that knows of his misfortunes can help feeling an interest?
His misfortunes. Yes, his misfortunes have been great indeed.
And of your affliction, you have reduced him into the present state of poverty, with had advantages, deprived him of the life your very father wished for him.
And this is your opinion of me. Well, my faults by this calculation are heavy indeed. But perhaps these offences might have been overlooked had not your pride been hurt.
My pride?
Yes, pride. Wounded by my honest confession of the objections that long prevented me from revealing my true feelings. Should I have concealed my struggles? Flattered you. But disguise of every sort is my abhorrence. Could you expect me to rejoice in the inferiority of your connections?
You are mistaken, Mr. Darcy. The mode of your declaration simply spared me the concern I might have felt in refusing you had you behaved in a more gentlemanlike manner.
More gentlemanlike?
You could not have offered your hand in any possible way that would tempt me to accept it. I had not known you a month before I felt you were the last man in the world whom I could possibly ever marry.
You have said quite enough, madam. I perfectly understand your feelings and now have only to be ashamed of my own. Please, accept my best wishes for your health and happiness and forgive my taking up so much of your time.
Are you quite sure you're recovered, Elizabeth? You had barely any rest last night and have scarce uttered 2 words this morning.
Oh, forgive me, Charlotte. I say I'm the most dreadful guest.
Nonsense, Lizzie. Only I worry it's such a persistent headache. Your father would never forgive me if you returned to Longbourn today unwell.
Indeed, he would not, but I promise you I'm quite well.
If you insist, then. Come, we should return to the parsonage before Colonel Fitzwilliam and Miss O'Darcy take their leave. I am sure you would not wish to.
Charlotte, would you mind terribly if I... That is, I do so enjoy the lanes here at Rosings. I think I might like to take the longer way back.
You have no wish of seeing Miss O'Darcy, do you? Oh, Lizzie, I do wish you would confide in me about his visit last night. I confess I have never known you to shout so. Was he cruel to you?
Oh, no, of course not. We just had a disagreement.
About... Very well, I shall press the matter. I will return alone and make your farewells. You need not fear a repeat encounter.
Oh, you are too good of a friend, Mrs. Collins. I believe I've disappointed you.
Of course not. How could you disappoint anyone?
If only she knew. Charlotte is not wrong, of course. I have not fact recovered from last night's headache. To think that I should have received an offer of marriage from Mr. Darcy, that he should have been in love with me. Oh, I suppose I should feel some pity for having rejected him with such, what did he say, incivility. But his pride, such abominable pride. No sympathy for what he had done to Jane. No denial of his treatment of Wickham. Thank heavens for Charlotte. With a bit of luck, I can take my leave of Hunsford without having to see.
Miss Bennet, I have been walking the grounds in some time in the hope of meeting you. Will you do me the honor of reading this letter?
I should discard this immediately. I should have turned away from the grove before he even saw me. Oh, I assure you, this is only due to the strongest curiosity.
Be not alarmed, madam, on receiving this letter, for you need not fear any renewal of those offers which were last night so disgusting to you. But you have charged me with 2 very grave offences. First, that I detached Mr. Bingley from your sister, and second, that I have been the sole means of ruining George Wickham. If, in this explanation, I relate feelings which may be offensive, I beg in advance for your forgiveness. The severity of the charges demands that it must be done, else I would have spared you this unpleasantness entirely. I had not long been in Hertfordshire before I saw that Bingley preferred your sister.
I do hope to see you again very soon, Miss Bennet. Perhaps next when you walk to Meryton.
I would like that, Mr. Bingley.
But it was not until the Netherfield ball that I became aware of the general expectation in town of their probable engagement.
I must hope to have the pleasure often repeated, especially when a certain desirable event shall take place.
Such a well-suited match, wouldn't you agree? Oh, what congratulations will then flow in.
From that moment, I observed your sister's behaviors attentively. Her look and manners were cheerful and engaging, but without any symptom of deep affection.
Without any symptom.
She received his attentions with pleasure. She did not seem to invite them with peculiar regard.
Bingley likes your sister undoubtedly, but he may never do more than like her if she does not help him on.
The quietness of her expression, the polite civility of her manner, it convinced me that her heart was not as violently engaged as my friend's.
She must leave him in no doubt of her affections. Mr. Bingley may lose interest if she insists on guarding her temper.
If I have been in error, then your resentment is not unreasonable. But there were other matters to consider. Your mother's family relations in Cheapside, though objectionable, were nothing to the total lack of modesty and the blatant desire for wealth she so frequently betrayed by herself.
Oh, yes, it is quite confirmed. Mr. Bingley has 5,000
Your younger sisters.
Colonel Forster will have you whipped, Denny, for misplacing your sword.
Miss Lydia, please.
And even, pardon me, your father.
Better come away, my dear. I think you have delighted us long enough.
All of this induced me to preserve Bingley from what I truly believed would be a most unhappy marriage. As for Wickham, I fear I must lay before you the whole history. Mr. Wickham was indeed my father's godson and my boyhood companion. His manners with my father were easy and engaging, but from my father he was careful to guard his true character. I am sure you have already been informed that Wickham was promised a parish living. I am equally sure of what you have not been informed.
Darcy, I am not so insensitive to the old man's wishes, but I have no desire of having the run of a church. You know I'm not suited to be a clergyman.
Oh, certainly not.
However, in lieu of taking orders, there is the matter of compensation. If I am not to accept the living, should I not be given a sum of equal value?
Your price?
Oh, what say you to £3,000?
£3,000? Oh, this cannot be. This must be false.
I granted Wickham's request on the grounds that he resign all claim to the church, but scarcely 2 years later.
I have come to the realization, Darcy, that I was wrong to refuse such a noble calling. I hope you will be so kind as to apply to the Archbishop and recommend me.
How much is your debt?
Well, let's just say my circumstances are bad.
Well, I had no difficulty believing it, but you will hardly blame me for refusing him, or for my resisting his next 5 requests.
5?
He no doubt abused my character in your society as boldly as he does in my own.
I have been a disappointed man, Miss Bennet. Military life is not what I was intended for. Mr. Darcy has done me a terrible disservice.
After this, our connection seemed entirely dissolved, but last summer he was most painfully reintroduced to my family's acquaintance. My sister Georgiana, who is 10 years my junior, was attending school at Ramsgate. Unbeknownst to myself, Wickham had followed her there.
Why, sweet Georgiana Darcy, you have blossomed overnight.
Mr. Wickham.
She was then but 15 and was persuaded to believe herself in love and to consent to an elopement.
You know, my brother and cousin did warn me to be on my guard for fortune hunters in Ramsgate, George.
Why, Miss Darcy, you know me too well to suspicion me of that. We grew up together, you and I. Born in poverty and raised in privilege, you know how much I desire to make friends based on the merits of their own character, rather than those of their relations.
A day or two before the event, I joined them unexpectedly.
Brother!
Unable to grieve or offend me, Georgiana acknowledged the truth of the affair. Now you may imagine what I felt and how I acted. Wickham's chief motive was my sister's fortune, a sum of £30,000. But I cannot doubt that he also sought revenge upon me. Now, had this elopement taken place, had he succeeded in disgracing my sister, his revenge would have been complete. This, madam, is a faithful narrative of every event concerning Mr. Wickham. I know not what lies he has told you, but detection could not be in your power. You are too good a person to suspicion those you would call friend. I hope you will believe me, but if your hatred prevents it, I invite you to appeal to Colonel Fitzwilliam for confirmation. He knows every particular. I will only add, God bless you.
I am an absolute fool. How despicably have I acted? How blind, partial, prejudiced. Was I so taken with Wickham that I couldn't have missed how very eagerly he related his misfortune? Was I so repulsed by Mr. Darcy's pride I could not detect the falsehood in Wickham's slander? Am I so used to the follies of my family that I have forgotten how ridiculous we must all appear? I have courted with ignorance and driven away reason. Until this moment, I never knew myself.
Elizabeth!
Oh, Jane! Oh, I thought our Uncle Gardner was to send his manservant in the carriage.
I could not wait longer, dear sister. The only person at Longbourn who feels your absence more keenly than I is our poor father. Why, Lizzie, you look frightfully pale. Has it been a very trying visit to Hunsford?
The carriage ride home with Jane was both a relief and a burden. I eagerly acquainted her with the truth of Wickham, but I would not trouble her with what I had learned of Bingley.
I don't know when I have been more shocked. Wickham, so very bad as this? It is past belief. And poor Mr. Darcy. Oh, what he must have suffered over Wickham's behavior towards his sister.
I'm heartily sorry for him. Oh, Jane, do you blame me for refusing his proposal?
Blame you? Oh, no.
But you should blame me for having spoken so highly of Mr. Wickham.
No, Lizzie, you could not have known the truth of it. Everything about Mr. Wickham's appearance and conduct gave us all leave to think well of him.
Yes, that is true. It seems between the two gentlemen. One had all the goodness and one all the appearance of it.
In this new light, it is fortunate that the militia have gone to Brighton, is it not?
Indeed. At least the ladies of Hertfordshire are safely beyond Wickham's reach. Oh, Jane, do you think we should make his conduct known?
With Wickham gone, surely we have no occasion to expose him further. What do you think?
Then we ought not to tempt it. Mr. Darcy has not authorized me to reveal it publicly, and he's entrusted me with the care of his younger sister's reputation. I would not wish to betray him.
Well, I am glad you are come back, Lizzie.
It is good to be home, Papa.
I trust Jane has acquainted you with how often in your absence I'm readily assured of my failings as a husband and father.
Sir?
Oh, Lizzie, is your father not dreadfully cruel in refusing to take us all to Brighton?
No, indeed, Mamma.
Lizzie!
Lydia and Kitty have already mourned for the loss of one regiment. Think what heartbreak a whole camp full of soldiers might bring.
Bravo! The return of good sense to Longbourn. I can hardly stomach the notion of spending an entire summer in Brighton with two, or may I say 3 of the silliest girls in England.
Oh, such delight you vex me, Mr. Bennet. Is it fair, Jane? Do you not wish for a holiday after being so cruelly cast aside by Mr. Bingley?
Mamma!
An undeserving young man who abandoned Netherfield after using my daughter extremely ill.
Mamma, I am quite reconciled to just putting this
And
off.
what of Lizzie, Mr. Bennet, your favourite girl, who refused dear Collins?
Dear Collins. There. You see, Lizzie, Mr. Collins is now quite adored.
Surely Lizzie could have use for Brighton to recover from visiting Mrs. Collins. What news of Charlotte, Lizzie? No doubt she talks constantly of becoming mistress of my house when your father is dead.
There, Mrs. Bennet. Do not give way to gloomy thoughts. Let us hope for better things. Let us flatter ourselves that I may live longer than you.
Oh, Papa, Jane!
Lydia?
Papa! Oh, hello, Lizzie. Welcome home.
Lydia, what is
Mama, you'll never guess what has happened.
Heavens, girl, what is it?
Harriet Forster, the wife of the colonel of the regiment, has invited me to be her guest at Brighton.
Oh, how exciting, my dear!
Invited to Brighton, you say? On your own?
Oh, Lizzie, Jane, is this not wonderful?
Mamma, I do not think that this is a good idea.
Oh, you must take every opportunity of enjoying yourself.
I cannot see why Mrs. Forster should not ask me as well as Lydia, Mamma.
Oh, Kitty.
Though I am not Harry's particular friend, I have just as much right to be asked as she has. Why, I am 2 years older.
See what cause she has to be so very jealous. 'Tis not as if I apply to Harriet for the invitation.
Jealousy is both reasonable and belongs to reasonable men, while envy is base and belongs to the base. For the one makes himself get good things by jealousy, while the other does not allow his neighbour to watch them through envy.
Oh, Jane, to see the streets so bright and crowded with scores of officers in red coats. Can you not see me sitting beneath a tent, Mamma, surrounded by 6 or 7 officers at once?
Oh, Lydia, do take hold of yourself. You know Papa cannot spare the horses from the field for so long a journey as to Brighton. You'll have no transport.
Papa, please, we'll ride all night through the rain if we must.
Lydia, for goodness sake.
Izzy, dear, I'm afraid our horses cannot be spared. But perhaps we might apply to your mother's sister Gardiner when she visits in August. Surely she and her uncle can take you to Brighton upon their return.
Papa?
Oh, Papa! Aunt Gardiner, what a clever idea!
Oh, Lizzie, oh, Lydia, is not Mr. Bennet the most excellent father in the world?
Most excellent. My, would that Harriet Forster had written that much sooner. There, you see, Lizzie, you are come home, Lydia has gone to Brighton, and I am restored to my former glory. We shall have peace and good sense come August.
Papa, you cannot be serious in granting Lydia your approval.
Why ever not?
Pa, consider how young Mrs. Forster is. Why, she's scarce a year older than Lydia, and every bit as silly. She's hardly a suitable chaperone.
Oh, come now. Colonel Forster is a sensible man. He can keep her out of any real mischief. And we are too poor for her to be an object of prey for such officers as would require a chaperone.
But no.
Mark me, my dears, we shall have no peace at Longbourn if Lydia does not go to Brighton.
Once more, in a span of 2 weeks, have Jane and I argued against Lydia's going. But Papa's will is resolute, and his argument does have merit. Lydia is too poor to be of interest to Mr. Wickham. I suppose there's no stopping her now. Mamma is in high spirits again, and my aunt and uncle are arriving today to collect Lydia.
Hello, Lizzie.
Dear aunt, how fares Cheapside?
Very well, my dear, very well. Though your uncle's business has called him back to London for the rest of the summer. We had so hoped to visit the Northern Lakes together after a detour through Brighton.
Uncle Gordon did not accompany you.
It is just as well, just as well. I fear the bulk of Lydia's trunks will soon overtake the carriage.
Indeed.
Lizzie, what say you to your accompanying your dear old aunt to the north? I confess I rather thought of giving up the holiday entirely after your uncle was summoned home, but it would please me greatly to show you the lay of Lambton.
Lambton, aunt?
A little town on the outskirts of Devonshire where I spent some of my youth. I so dearly wish to see the place again. Before marrying your uncle, I had the run of a very lovely shop in the village, you know.
Will you continue your tour of the lakes then?
Why, of course, if you wish it. We could apply to see the great estates of Oxford, Warwick, Birmingham. In fact, there is one estate not 2 miles from Lambton, for which I shall brook no argument. Oh, if it were merely a fine house richly furnished, I should not care about it myself, but the grounds are delightful. They have some of the finest woods in the country. What say you, Lizzie? Will you come?
I can never refuse you, aunt.
Wonderful. I shall speak to your mother and father directly.
Aunt Gardiner?
Yes, dear?
What is the name of this grand estate we simply must visit?
Oh, did I not say? Well, now that you mention it, I do believe you may know the owner. Your mother wrote me last spring about a gentleman staying in Netherfield.
Oh, Netherfield. Oh, you mean Mr. Bingley. You are taking me to see Mr. Bingley's estate in town.
Bingley? Oh, heavens, no. We are to Pemberley, my dear. Mr. Darcy's home.
Pemberley? My aunt wishes to take me to Pemberley. The estate of Mr. Darcy, the man I cruelly rejected and then blamed for ruining the life of the scoundrel who tried to defile his sister. Oh, how horrifying. I had scarce but a few weeks of travelling through Derbyshire before the dreaded appointment. When we arrived at the inn at Lambton, I applied to the housekeeper of Pemberley directly and inquired as to whether or not the family was at home. Mercifully, she replied,
"Family are away in London, madam. They are guests of Mr. Bingley and his sister. Though we expect them all arrived here tomorrow, ma'am, along with the master's sister, Miss Georgiana."
There, you see, Lizzie, you need not worry about imposing on your friend.
"Oh, does this young lady know Mr. Darcy?"
A little.
"And do you not think him a very handsome gentleman, ma'am?"
Very handsome.
I'm sure I know none so handsome nor so good as my master, and I've known him since he were 4 years old. This is a portrait, and very much like him, ma'am. But in the gallery upstairs, there's a finer, larger picture.
Is your master much at Pemberley in the course of a year?
Not so much as we could wish, ma'am. If he would marry, we might see more of him, but I do not know when that will be.
Mr. Darcy,
Miss Bennet?
your housekeeper,
Mrs. Reynolds.
Mrs. Reynolds, yes, she informed us that you would certainly not be here until tomorrow.
Well, yes, well, business required my steward, and I return early.
Oh, I'm so dreadfully sorry for intruding on your privacy. We shall go away directly.
Yes, I beg that you would stay, Miss Bennet. Please, you are most welcome here. How long has been your stay at Derbyshire?
About half a month, sir.
And your family, are they all?
Oh well, they are all well. Yes, I thank you.
Oh, good. Yes, excellent. Miss Bennet,
Darcy,
you must understand. Miss Bennet, you must allow me to. That is, when I wrote the letter, it was a matter of.
Please, you have no need of explaining.
But you must know that when I wrote it, I believed myself perfectly calm. I am since convinced that it was written in a dreadful bitterness of spirit. I beg you forgive me.
The letter perhaps began in bitterness, but Mr. Darcy, it did not end so.
I knew that what I wrote must give you pain.
But it was necessary, truly, sir. Do not distress yourself.
I hope you have destroyed it.
It shall be burnt if you wish it.
Did it perhaps make you think not so ill of me?
Mr. Darcy,
Oh, good morning, Mr. Darcy. We did not expect you till the morning.
Apologies, Mrs. Reynolds. I had not the time of informing you.
I will ring for tea. Mrs. Gardner, Miss Bennet.
Miss Bennet, would you do me the honor of introducing me to your friend?
Of course, sir. May I present Mrs. Edwin Gardner?
Delighted, madam. Are you having a pleasant stay in Derbyshire?
We are, sir, though I fear I have imposed a bit longer on my niece than intended. She has been my touring companion these last few weeks as my husband was obliged to stay in town.
Then may I inquire after Mr. Gardner, ma'am?
You may, sir. He does very well, thank you, though he is bound to his clients in Cheapside.
Cheapside? Very charming village. I just happened by Gracechurch Street not 2 weeks ago.
Oh, that is very near where we live. You must allow us to extend you an invitation.
Only if you allow us to do the same. Mrs. Gardner, Miss Bennet, I will be joined tomorrow by my sister, Georgiana, and on her behalf, I would like to extend an invitation to join us and the Bingleys at Pemberley for dinner. Tomorrow evening, perhaps, or some other night during your stay in Derbyshire.
Oh, you are very kind, Mr. Darcy. We do thank you. What say you to that, Lizzie?
We would be delighted, sir. Can this be Mr. Darcy? You should speak to me at all. It's amazing after my behavior at Hunsford. but to behave in a manner so kind, so cordial as to wish us to form an acquaintance with his sister. Why is he so altered? From what can it proceed? For it cannot be for my sake that his manners are so softened. After accusing him so abominably about Wickham, I declare to be impossible that he should still care for me.
Miss Bennet, how supremely agreeable to have arrived and found you a guest at Pemberley as well. Why, Caroline and I were just speaking the other day of how dearly we missed our Hertfordshire friends.
Dearly.
Oh, you are very kind, Mr. Bingley. I thank you. I do not believe that you've met Mrs. Bennet's sister, Mrs. Gardiner. Mr. and Miss Bingley.
Mrs. Gardiner, it is a great pleasure, madam. I remember how very highly of you Miss Jane Bennet often spoke.
Thank you, sir. I must return the compliment, for not a single letter arrived from my sister all season that did not mention her kindness and attentions to my niece when she were ill.
It was my honor to be of service, ma'am. Pray, might I inquire, that is to say, is she, or rather, do all your nieces still reside at Longbourn?
Do you mean to ask if they are also unmarried, sir? Come, let us share a cup of tea, and I will tell you all the news of Meryton.
Miss Bennet, do allow me to introduce someone who so particularly wishes to know you. My sister, Miss Darcy. Miss Bennet, do allow me to introduce someone who so particularly wishes to know you. My sister, Miss Darcy.
Georgiana.
Oh, it's so lovely to meet you, Miss Darcy. Your brother speaks very highly of you.
He's too kind, Miss Bennet, surely.
Oh, I cannot believe it. Mrs. Reynolds showed us a very pretty room yesterday. Recently redecorated, I understand?
My new sitting room.
Very elegant.
Thank you, Miss Bennet. It was a gift from my brother. I spent a good deal of time with my painter after... That is, when I returned home from school last summer.
And who can otherwise admit such cozy surroundings? You have impeccable taste, Miss Darcy.
Indeed, dear Georgiana. How could anyone think otherwise? You are very kind, Miss Eliza, to pay such compliments to my dear friend. It is always good to enjoy a bit of female companionship. Why, Darcy was telling me just the other day how glad he was to know that I would be at Pemberley to dote on his dear sister.
Of course he was.
Pray, Miss Eliza, are not the militia recently removed from Meryton?
Yes, they've spent the majority of the summer in Brighton.
That must be a great loss for your family. Whatever are Miss Kitty and Miss Lydia finding to do with themselves?
Well, actually, Miss Lydia...
The Bennet girls are not so quite genteel as you or I, Miss Darcy. Indeed, you would find them a great deal more adventurous. I quite envy their vivacity.
Thank you, Miss Bingley.
I dare say you or I have hardly the spirit necessary to spend our summers chasing after every young officer and declaring ourselves to be in love with every new handsome face in town. Why, Georgiana, are you quite all right?
I feel the August heat has overwhelmed me as well, Miss Darcy. Shall we have some refreshment while you tell me more of your painting? I am told you are quite accomplished.
How very ill Eliza Bennet looks, Mr. Darcy. I never in my life saw anyone so much altered as she since the winter. She's grown so brown and coarse, I feel I should not recognize her again.
Well, I perceive no other alteration than her being rather tanned. No miraculous consequence of traveling in the summer.
For my own part, I must confess that I never could see any beauty in her. Her face is too thin and her complexion has no brilliancy, and while her teeth are tolerable, her features are not at all handsome.
Miss Bingley.
Why, I remember when we first knew her in Hertfordshire, how amazed we were to find that she was a reputed beauty. I particularly recollect you saying the night of the Meryton Assembly that she was not even tolerable enough to dance with.
Yes, indeed, but that was only when I first knew her, for it is now many months since I have considered her as one of the handsomest women of my acquaintance.
Oh.
Excuse me, sir, but the post just come by way of express.
Oh, thank you, Mrs. Reynolds.
Only it's very odd, sir, but I believe it's for Miss Bennet. 'Twas directed straight here by the landlord at the Landed Inn.
Indeed. Well, Miss Elizabeth Bennet. Thank you, Mrs. Reynolds.
Oh, Mr. Darcy, I'm so sorry. I can't imagine.
Oh, it's all right, Miss Bennet. It was sent express, so it must be important.
If you desire privacy, you may read it in the library.
Thank you, Miss Darcy. Oh, I suppose I have been rather anxious for a letter from Jane, though I must confess I dread leaving poor Georgiana to Miss Bingley's charms. I can think of nothing but wonder at Mr. Darcy's newfound civility. To be sure, the General Society of Hertfordshire would hardly recognize him.
Oh, Lizzie, Sister Gardiner, some of us all. How could Mr. Bennet have let Lydia go to Brighton with nobody to take care of her? Why, I told Mr. Bennet he should not let her go. And what of the Foresters? I am sure there was some great neglect on their side, for she is not the kind of girl to do such a thing. My sweet, tempered Lydia.
Oh,
And now here's Mr. Bennet gone away, and I know he will fight Wickham, and then he will be killed, and then the Collinses will turn us out before he's cold in his grave. Oh, and my dear sister, with you not in London, how will Lydia know the best shops for finding wedding clothes? Whatever shall we do?
You look so pale, Jane. How much you must have gone through.
Do not distress yourself over me, Lizzie.
Oh, I'm so sorry we could not get here sooner. Has anything been heard?
Only that our father went to Uncle Gardner in London. He's staying at an inn near Gracechurch Street.
And what of the fugitives?
Nothing yet. Papa wrote this morning that Uncle Gardner had some news. Uncle has been using his influence in Cheapside to discover them.
What sort of news? Good or bad?
Lizzie, what is there of good to be expected? Kuno Forster wrote that Wickham was in a wretched state of finances. He owes a good deal in town, and there's even talk of gaming debts. The Colonel believes more than £10,000 would be necessary to clear in debt in Brighton alone.
10,000? Oh, Jane!
Think of what this means to poor Lydia.
Unhappy as the event must be for Lydia, we may draw from it this useful lesson, that loss of virtue in a female is irretrievable, that her reputation is no less brittle than it is beautiful, and that she cannot be too much guarded in her behavior towards the undeserving of the other sex.
It has almost been a week now since anything new had been heard, where there was no hope of recovering Lydia and salvaging our family's reputation. With Mamma still in hysterics and Papa still in town, I believe nothing short of a miracle.
Mama, look! Father arrives home.
Oh!
And he brings Lydia.
Oh, to think that 2 months ago I went away. Good gracious, I'm sure I had no more idea of being married till I came back again. Oh, to think only 2 months since I went away. Good gracious, I'm sure I had no more idea of being married till I came back again. But what good fun it all was.
Oh, my dear girl!
Mama, do the people hereabouts know that I'm married? I was afraid they might not, so I let down the glass in the carriage and took off my glove so that they all might see when we drove past Longbourn.
Oh, Mr. Bennet, is it not wonderful to have a daughter married, and our youngest of them all? And Mr. Wickham, so handsome you look in your red coat. Do you not think so, Lizzie?
You're not charming, Mamma. I'm sure my sisters must all envy me. They must all go to Brighton. This is the place to get husbands. Why, I dare say I shall get husbands for all of them before the autumn is over.
My share of the favor, but I don't particularly like your way of getting husbands.
Yes. Well, shall we all retire to the parlor for tea?
Ah, Jane, I take your place now. You must go lower because I am a married woman.
What a coach ride that must have been. Dear father, what sorrows you must have endured.
Say nothing of that, dear Lizzie. Who should suffer but myself?
Oh, you must not be so severe upon yourself.
No, Lizzie, let me feel how much I have been to blame. I am not afraid of being overpowered by my guilt. Will pass soon enough. And Lizzie, I promise I bear you no resentment for the advice you gave in July, which, considering the event, shows some greatness of mind, my dear.
Oh, Papa.
Anyway, the thing is done. And the term so astonishingly convenient upon myself.
The term, sir?
Yes. All that is required of me is to ensure Lydia's equal share of her inheritance.
Impossible.
Yes, Lizzie, those were my sentiments exactly.
But his gaming, all of Mr. Wickham's debts. How can Wickham have married Lydia in town without paying off his creditors?
And now we've come to the point. Lizzie, there are two things I want very much to know. One is how much money your Uncle Gardner must have laid down to bring this farcical elopement about. And the other, how am I ever going to repay him?
Miss Bennet,
Mr. Wickham.
I am afraid I interrupt your solitude.
You do.
Ah.
But the interruption need not be unwelcome.
I should be sorry if it were. I do so hope we are still friends.
We are not, Mr. Wickham. We are brother and sister now.
Indeed, sister. I understood from Mr. Gardner that you were recently in Derbyshire with your aunt.
I was.
I envy you the pleasure. I believe my new regiment will prevent me from getting any nearer to Derbyshire in the coming months and Newcastle.
How unfortunate.
Did you happen to visit the village of Kimpton on your travels?
We might have, but our trip was curtailed, Mr. Wickham.
I only mention it because it is the living which I ought to have had. A most delightful place, Kimpton. Excellent parsonage. A warm parish.
Really? How should you have liked making sermons, Mr. Wickham?
Exceedingly well. It would have been just the thing for me.
Because I have heard from authority that there was a time when sermon making was not as palatable to you as it seems at present. But you actually declared your resolution against taking orders and were reimbursed accordingly.
Yes. Well,
George, go in to see Mamma in the parlour. She has need for your talents at the card table. Lizzie, why have you not joined us? You have missed my account of our wedding. Are you not curious about the affair?
Not at all.
You're so strange. But I must tell you all how it went off. We were married, you know, at St. Clement's, and it was all settled that we should be there by 11 o'clock. My uncle and I went together, and the others were meant to meet us at the church. Well, Monday morning came, and there was such a fuss, and then I should have gone quite distracted.
This explanation went on for above 12 minutes.
When he was late, I started to worry that the groomsmen might never show. But luckily, I remember that if he'd been prevented, the wedding need not be delayed. We had an able substitute in Mr. Darcy.
Mr. Darcy?
Yes.
Mr. Darcy at your wedding?
Why, of course. It was Mr. Darcy who discovered us in London. He brought Wickham to the church. Well, someone had to pay for the vicar and the flowers, Lizzie. Not to mention Wickham's debts in London and needs settling and all his credits back in Brighton before we... Gracious me, I quite forgot.
What?
I have not said a word. It was to be such a secret. I promised Mr. Darcy so faithfully. He was adamant that no one must know. Oh, What will Wickham say?
Oh, Lizzie, though it pains me to say it of my own sister, I am happy Lydia and Wickham are off to Newcastle now. It's just such a relief to have the house back to normal.
Indeed.
Would you like to walk into Meryton with Kitty and me?
Jane! Jane! Make haste, child. He has come! He has come!
Whom, Mamma?
Why, Mr. Bingley, of course. He has come back to Netherfield this week, and he is walking up the lane this very moment.
Mrs. Bennet.
Mr. Bingley, it is a long time since you went away.
Mrs. Bennet, I hope that I might have a word of private conversation with your daughter. How
That's your sister, Mr. Bingley.
Jane, I have been a fool.
I do hope Caroline enjoyed her stay in London.
Jane, I beg your forgiveness. In my absence from Netherfield, you have endured pain, and I would wish to drive an arrow through my heart for having been the cause of it, except that I now have the smallest chance of possibly relieving it. When I left, I accepted some extraordinarily bad advice from a friend. I allowed myself to be convinced you did not care for me, could not love me as I loved you. But my friend now assures me he was in the wrong, and I am my own master now. Dearest Jane, I cannot rest until I know for certain. Will you marry me?
Yes, Mr. Bingley.
Oh, Mr. Bingley! Oh, Jane, you will be a very happy woman.
There's too much happiness, Mamma. Not too much. Why is not everybody is happy?
Oh, my dear, dear Jane. Oh, I'm sure I shan't get a wink of sleep all night. Oh, I was sure you could not be so beautiful for nothing.
You are a good girl, Jane. And I have great pleasure in thinking you will be so happily settled. Your tempers are so alike, though each so complying that nothing will ever be resolved on. So easy that every servant will treat you, and so generous that you will always exceed your income.
Exceed their income? Oh, my dear Mr. Bennet, what are you talking of? Why, he has 5,000 a year.
Miss Elizabeth Bennet. This lady, I suppose, is your mother?
Yes, ma'am, she is. Mamma, this is Lady Catherine de Bourgh.
And that, I suppose, is one